well, let's see, to attain the human state, first of all, entails all the 8 leisures and 10 endowments, right? So the 8 leisures are briefly, let's see, being free from being born as a long-life god, free from being born as a hungry ghost, free from being born as an animal, free from having long views, free from being born in a barbarian land, free from having faculties that are defective. Let's see, there's 2 more. Free from being at a time when the Buddhist teachings don't exist. And free from being born... maybe not having faith. Free from not having faith. Anyway, then the 10 endowments, there's 10...
community of Sangha who supported, community which supported and a Sangha...
That's the endowments. There's 10 endowments, 5 have to do with oneself and 5 have to do with others. So the 5 that have to do with oneself... Maybe it's free from having committed a heinous crime. Maybe that, I don't remember. The 10 endowments, so there's 5 that have to do with the self, are being a human, having faculties complete, having faith in the Buddhist teachings, let's see, being human, having one's faculties complete, being born in the central land, being born at a time that Buddhist teachings exist and having faith in the teachings. And then the ones that have to do with others are, let's see, that the Buddhist teachings exist, that there's people who uphold the teachings, there's people who generated realizations, people who are qualified to teach, and people who generally have kindness in their heart. Anyway, so there's 8 freedoms. Freedom from states that would make it impossible for us to practice the Dharma. And then the 10 conditions that make it that are ideal for us to be able to practice the Dharma. So that's what it's talking about when we have, it's difficult to achieve a human state. So then the Buddha, then there's the meditation on the difficulty of attaining this precious human rebirth. So the difficulty of attaining it by analogy, difficulty of attaining it by according to cause, and difficulty of attaining it by number, looking at numbers. Looking at the percentages. So here, those are famous analogies. So the difficulty of achieving the human state by analogy. This is a famous analogy that the Buddha actually taught in one sutra, where he said, imagine there's like a golden yoke. So like, golden yoke floating on the ocean. So it's pushed by, the currents and waves and the wind in randomly, floating all over the ocean. And then there's a sea turtle there's a sea turtle in the ocean who only comes to the surface once every 100 years, or longer. There's different amounts of time, but say once every 100 years he comes to the surface to take a breath of air. And also he's blind, so he can't see. So what are the chances that that sea turtle, when he comes to the surface to take a breath of air, will put his head through the golden yoke? It's almost impossible. It's like very, 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 very unlikely it would ever happen. So then the Buddha says that that's illustrative of the chances of taking a precious human rebirth, complete with all the leisures and endowments. That's extremely difficult to do. So that's what he's talking about here in this verse 20. For these very reasons, the Buddha has said that as difficult as it is for a turtle to insert its neck into a yoke adrift upon the vast ocean, it is more difficult to attain the human state. So why don't we look at that end note number 10, and see which sutra it is. It's on page 171. Yeah, I'm not really familiar with that sutra. It says, O monks, suppose that this great earth were to become an ocean, upon which a single yoke were being tossed about by the wind and thus being moved from here to there. If under that ocean there were a blind turtle, do you think it would be easy for it to insert its head into that yoke when it rises to the surface only once every 100 years? Lord, no, it would not, replied the monks. The Lord said, it is a similar fashion, O monks. It is extremely hard to obtain the human state. So there's the sutra. So this is just an illustration or an example for how difficult it is to achieve this precious human life. And verse 21, if even by the transgression of one instant, an eon may be spent in the deepest hell, then because of that transgression, because of the transgressions I have gathered since beginningless time, what need to mention my not going to a happy realm? So if even in an instant, like I was saying yesterday, or Shantideva was saying yesterday, that you become angry at a Buddha or angry at a Bodhisattva, even for one moment, then that can cause you to take rebirth, for an eon in a deepest hell. Then think of all the non-virtuous actions we've created in this life and in previous lives. Then once we take rebirth in a lower realm, then there's not many conditions that for causing our virtuous karma to ripen, and rather there are a lot of conditions that will cause our non-virtuous karmas to ripen. So think of all the non-virtuous karmas we've created in the past, and then once we've taken rebirth in lower realms, there are all these conditions to cause our non-virtuous karmas to ripen, and we create a lot more non-virtuous karma. Then it becomes very difficult to be free from that state. So then because of the transgressions I have gathered since beginningless time, what need to mention my not going to a happy realm? How difficult it would be to go to a happy rebirth again. Then verse 22, yet having experienced merely that rebirth in hell, I shall still not be liberated. For while it is being experienced, other wrongdoing will be extensively produced. Right? So while we're even in hell or animal rebirth or whatever, while we're there, it's not only the karma to be there becomes exhausted, but we create new karma to take rebirth in such a state again. And then verse 23, so if having found leisure such as this, I do not attune myself to what is wholesome, there could be no greater deception, and there could be no greater folly. Right? So if having found this leisure and opportunity, which I have now, if I do not attune myself to what is wholesome, so he was saying that above, here he says again, if I do not, put effort into engaging in virtuous actions, and practice plurality, practice generosity, practice patience, practice loving kindness and compassion, and so forth. If I do not attune myself, and especially in this context, try to generate and increase our bodhicitta, our contrived bodhicitta, and generate uncontrived bodhicitta, and generate wisdom, realizing emptiness, and so forth. If I do not attune myself to what is wholesome, there could be no greater deception. Right? So if I think that it'll be easy to have this opportunity again, so there's no need to make much effort now, I can just kind of relax and enjoy myself and do whatever kind of my fancy desires without really seriously thinking about my past, my future rebirths, and liberation and enlightenment, then thinking that it's easy to achieve human rebirth again, then there could be no greater way of deceiving ourselves. We're completely deceiving ourselves. And there could be no greater folly. That would be a huge mistake, and a very tragic mistake. Then verse 24, and if having understood this, so having understood the law of cause and effect, having understood how we take rebirth in samsara, and how it's possible to be free from samsara, having understood all the benefits of bodhicitta and the suffering of the lower realms. So this is just looking at our own condition, not to mention not benefiting others. If we don't use this precious human life well, not to mention how it's a huge mistake because we're not using an opportunity to benefit others. Just looking at the benefit we can bring to ourselves or not is a huge mistake. So if having not understood this, I still foolishly continue to be slothful, right? To be lazy. Just when we were in Bodh Gaya recently, where was it? Rinpoche. I think it was. Where's Dipti? Dipti, are you here?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I think it was in that all the directors of the different FPMT centers and projects in India. We had a meeting in Bodh Gaya, and Lama Zopa Rinpoche came for 20 minutes. That time Rinpoche used this word sloth. He referred to himself. He asked Roger, "What's that animal that moves very slowly?" It's a sloth on trees. Climbs trees very slowly. So a sloth is it's like if they're really lazy or not, I don't know, but it's kind of like a symbol for a very lazy person. They just hang out in the trees and eat and sleep and move very slowly. So Shantideva is saying, and it basically means lazy. If having understood this, I still foolishly continue to be slothful, when the hour of my death arrives, tremendous grief will rear its head. So at the time that I'm dying, if I look back on my life and see that I've just wasted, my life, like, chasing money or fame or, power or sex or, just frivolously, sleeping and eating and, just doing frivolous things, then, that sort of sense of, having just squandered away such a precious opportunity will overcome one with grief, seeing that at the time of death. So he's saying before death comes, then think well about what's meaningful to do with your life and do that, rather than just procrastinating, putting it off, and then death comes and then you feel like the most important things that to do in life you've not done at all. What a shame that would be. So then, when the hour of my death arrives, tremendous grief will rear its head. So if we don't use this precious human life well, in a meaningful way, then we'll suffer in this life, because at the time of death, we'll have tremendous grief. And then verse 25, we'll also suffer in future lives. Then if my body blazes for a long time in the unbearable flames of hell, inevitably my mind will be tormented by the fires of unendurable remorse, right? So if in hell we can see like, if we have some clairvoyance, which is said some beings in hell do, you can see the causes of what caused you to be born there. So we can look back and see we had this human life, we had the opportunity to practice Dharma or to benefit others or to generate more kindness, more patience. But we didn't use that opportunity. Rather, we just chased after, we just followed our own attachment and kind of used our life in a way that's very harmful to many others around us. Then and because of that, then we've taken rebirth in hell. What unendurable remorse that we'll feel. So not only will have remorse at the time of death, but we'll have remorse in future lives. And then 26, having found by some coincidence this beneficial state that is so hard to find, if now while able to discriminate, I once again am led into the hells, then as though I were hypnotized by a spell, I shall reduce this mind to nothing. Even I do not know what is causing me confusion. What is there dwelling inside me? Right? So all of us kind of have this experience, Especially, I don't know, sometimes, I remember, because I was raised Catholic and Christian, and then I stopped believing in the main teachings of the church, Christian church, and then for a while I was just kind of agnostic or atheist. And then I met Buddhism. But I remember having the feeling when I started seriously studying Buddhism and kind of thinking about what, the main teachings of the Buddha, especially about the law of cause and effect, past and future lives, the existence, the possibility of rebirth in lower realms. And then seeing that, it seems rational, it seems true. If you analyze with reason, then it seems like accurate what it's saying. Once you generate that kind of Buddhist worldview, it's a little scary. There's a little fear that comes with it. I mean, I felt it a little scary because you kind of feel like I can't, if I just go back to the way I was living my life before, like not caring about past, what's going to happen to me next life, not caring about what kind of karma I create, then because you've already kind of come to the conclusion that what the Buddha is teaching is true, you're not comfortable with. You can't, it's like you can go back to living the way you were before, but inside yourself you'll be very uncomfortable with yourself. Like you'll have some fear about what's going to happen in the future. Before you know, if you don't believe in past and future lives, you don't believe law of cause and effect, then you can do all these kind of, whatever you want. And there's not a sense, there's only a concern about repercussions in this life. There's no sense about, what's going to happen to me in the long term of future lives. But once you kind of, accept that this long-term future exists, then it's almost like you can't avoid being concerned about it on some level. But so he says then even knowing all of this, in verse 27, even knowing all of this that he's just discussed before, then as though I were hypnotized by a spell, I shall reduce this mind to nothing. So if I take rebirth in the lower realms, even knowing all this, and I just ignore it, I ignore the whole law of cause and effect, and the difference between virtue and non-virtue, and the fact of death and the fact of rebirth and the possibility of rebirth in the lower realms. But I just ignore all that and just follow my own desire, my afflictive desires, afflictive emotions, and take rebirth in the lower realms, then it'll be like totally unbearable for my mind. So now, even knowing that, even I do not know what is causing me confusion. So even knowing all that, why do I even have any doubt now about what to do with my life? Why is it that I'm still attracted to just being lazy and just following my sense desires? What is there dwelling inside me, right? So that's the introduction to the next whole set of verses. So now he's going to talk about, below he's going to talk about all the afflictive emotions, right? Anger, attachment, jealousy, ignorance, wrong views, and so forth. All these afflictive emotions, and how even we have the wisdom, understanding the main aspects of the path, why it's still difficult to practice, because we have the habit of these afflictive emotions inside us. And so, in order to overcome our obstacles to putting sincere effort and time and energy into practicing, we have to deal with the afflictive emotions. Then he's going to give a whole bunch of advice about how to deal with our afflictive emotions and how to reduce and eliminate them. Yeah, like that. So why don't we just look at the first few verses? We won't get, there's a whole lot of verses about the afflictive emotions, but we can just look at the first few and then do some meditation. So verse 28. So it all comes from this question: what is there dwelling inside me? Right? Then verse 28. Although enemies such as hatred and craving have neither arms nor legs. So hatred and craving, like right, the two main afflictive emotions: hatred or anger, and craving, attachment, desire, afflictive desire. So although enemies such as hatred and craving have neither any arms nor legs, and are neither courageous nor wise, right? They're not. How have I, like a slave, been used by them? So he's kind of comparing, the afflictive emotions which abide within us to an external person who might oppress us. Imagine in Shantideva's time, everybody's ruled by a king or some kind of ruler, and the kings, to control their subjects, they use military or strong warriors who have big arms, strong legs, and weapons, and are very courageous and brave, and they're not afraid to slay other people or to themselves die in battle. So because they're very big and strong and they have weapons and they have this courageous attitude, then they can easily subjugate people who are weaker. So he's kind of comparing the afflictive emotions within us to an oppressive warrior like this. Although enemies such as hatred and craving have neither arms nor legs, so it's not like they have a big powerful body, and they're not courageous, and they're not intelligent, they're not wise. So how is it that I've been used like a slave by these afflictive emotions? How is it that I'm enslaved by my hatred, for others? Or how is it that I'm enslaved by my craving for what I perceive as very attractive and desirable? How is it that I'm just like blindly drawn along by these afflictive emotions, like a water buffalo may be pulled by a rope that's tethered to its nose, something like that. 29. So verse 29. For while they dwell within my mind, at their pleasure they cause me harm. Yet I patiently endure them without any anger. But this is inappropriate and a shameful time for patience. So he's saying, as long as hatred, anger, jealousy, attachment, worry, and sort of heedlessness, all the different afflictive emotions, as long as they dwell within my mind, at their pleasure they cause me harm. These afflictive emotions are by very nature something that when they arise in the mind, they disturb the peace of our mind. So anytime we feel the peace of our mind being disturbed, then we can be sure there's an afflictive emotion present in our mind at that time. And then it's important to check to see what afflictive emotion is it that's disturbing my peace. Is it irritation, anger, Is it jealousy? Is it attachment to something? Longing, craving and longing for something? Anytime the peace of our mind is disturbed, there's either exaggeration of the unpleasantness of something or of some object, or the exaggeration of the pleasantness, attractiveness of some object. So while they dwell in my mind, at their pleasure, they cause me harm. Yet I patiently endure them without any anger. So it's saying when we get angry, we always get angry at something external. Something, we say, you caused me to be angry. Why are you doing this to me? Why is the weather like this? Why is this happening to me? We don't get angry at the afflictive emotions, the selfishness, or this grasping at a strongly existent I, or at our own longing and desire for something. We never get angry at those things. We get angry at external things. So he's saying, when we see, yet I patiently endure them without any anger. But this is inappropriate and this is inappropriate and a shameful time for patience. So when other people are doing things to harm us, it's important to be patient then. But when we see the afflictive emotions arising in our own mind, that's not a time to be patient, just to let it go. Right? When we see afflictive emotions arising in our mind, we should see them as faulty and do something to eradicate them. Right? Okay, and then verse 30. So we'll stop with verse 30. Should even all the gods and demigods rise up against me as my enemies? They could not lead nor place me in the roaring fires of the deepest hell. Yet the mighty foe, these disturbing conceptions, in a moment can cast me amidst those flames, which, when met, will cause not even the ashes of the King of Mountains to remain. So what he's saying in those two verses, in verse 30, what he's saying in those two verses, in short, is, if we've completely subdued our mind, So subduing the mind, making the mind peaceful, pacifying the forces, the afflictive emotions, pacifying the forces in our mind which destroy our peace, which cause disturbance, and destroy the peace of the mind. This is really like one of the main Buddhist practices. If you remember in this famous verse, which we recited before the teachings, where the Buddha summarized, shortly after his enlightenment, he summarized his own teaching, saying, do not commit any non-virtuous action, perfect every virtuous action, subdue your own mind. This is the teaching of the Buddha. So subduing your own mind. And then also the mantra, Shakyamuni Buddha's name mantra, Tayata Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Swaha. So one interpretation of Muni is subduing. One is subdued their own mind. So the Buddha is spoken of in that mantra as the one who's perfectly subdued, greatly subdued his own mind. So imagine if we've perfectly subdued our own mind like the Buddha has. And then there's many beautiful stories from the life of Shakyamuni Buddha to illustrate how he's done this, or the fact that he has done this. Like one of the famous stories is 3 times Devdatta, he tried to, in conjunction with the king Ajatasattu, he tried to kill the Buddha on 3 different occasions. So on one occasion, I guess the king had these great war elephants. And there was one that was known as very hot-tempered, very volatile, very angry. So they gave a lot of alcohol to this one war elephant and stirred him up to get him very angry. And then when the Buddha was walking down the road in Rajagir, they released the elephant, hoping that the elephant would trample over the Buddha. So at that time, Ananda was walking. Buddha's attendant Ananda was walking with him, and Ananda saw the elephant coming. Anyway. So Ananda was saying to Buddha, come, run, we have to go, Everyone else is running out of the street when they see this famous, wild, very violent elephant coming. Everybody else is fleeing, to take cover. And the Buddha was walking down the middle of the street, and Ananda was saying, come, we have to run away, or else the elephant's going to run us over. And the Buddha didn't. He said, no, you just stand behind me, but we'll be safe, don't worry. The Buddha just stayed in the middle of the road and then gave out this great elephant call. He had anyway, when he was meditating in the forest earlier at a different time, he had been meditating nearby a great she-elephant. And he learned how to talk with her by imitating her voice. So at that time he gave out this she-elephant call, and it completely subdued this wild elephant. But that's an example of how the Buddha's mind is totally free from fear, and free from not able to be perturbed by whatever other people do. So that's what he's talking about in verse 30. Should even all the gods and demigods rise up against me as my enemies, not to mention all the humans, all the animals, if all the sentient beings rise up against me as my enemy and try to harm me, if my own mind is perfectly subdued, like the mind of the Buddha, then they can't. It's impossible for them to cause me to take rebirth, to take a miserable rebirth. All they can do is harm my body, right? They can kill, even up to torture and kill us. But if we have control over our own mind, then they can't cause us. External beings can't cause us to create karma, to take rebirth as an animal or a hungry ghost or in hell. It's only the afflictive emotions and the other karmas in our own mind that can cause us to do that. So should even all the gods and demigods rise up against me as my enemies, they could not lead me nor place me in the roaring fires of the deepest hell. Why? Because they could not cause me to generate anger or generate craving or generate ignorance. It's only, yet my mighty foe, these disturbing emotions, these disturbing conceptions, in a moment can cast me into those flames. So even everybody else, externally, people treat us like really well. People are very, very polite, very kind, very, hospitable, very tolerant, very, forgiving. I mean, externally, everybody treats us really well, but internally, if we have a lot of turmoil in our minds, a lot of anger, a lot of irritability, a lot of selfishness and self-cherishing, and strong kind of out of this world expectations for what people should do, that even they won't make us happy either. Even everybody treats us perfectly, it also won't cause us happiness. So it's these disturbing emotions in our mind that cause us either to be happy or to suffer, to have peace or to have a disturbed mind, and to take rebirth in a happy life or a miserable life. Yet the mighty foe of these disturbing conceptions in a moment can cast me amidst those flames, which when met, so the flames of hell, which when met will cause not even the ashes of the King of Mountains to remain. Okay. So we'll stop there, and then do some meditation again. So again, you can look at any of the verses we've read. So we've been talking mostly here about the faults of the afflictive emotions and how important it is if we want to continue cultivating, nurturing this attitude of bodhicitta and making all of our actions accord with this supreme goal of achieving enlightenment for the benefit of others, how it's important to address the afflictive emotions in our mind. Rather than blaming our problems on others or on external conditions, but to identify afflictive emotions when they arise in the mind and reduce them because they cause us so much harm. Okay? So you can meditate on that or on anything else that we've spoken about this morning. So again, we'll do some meditation for 5 minutes, and then if you have questions or comments, we can discuss after that. Okay? So again, now meditate for 5 minutes or so. just stop there. So we can relax the meditation there. So one final thing I just wanted to point out. Usually we often talk about the Lamrim, the graduated stages of the path to enlightenment, which is kind of, one way of presenting all of the Buddhist teachings. It's very common in Tibetan Buddhism. So in the way the sequence in which the topics are set out in the Lamrim, then after Guru devotion, first there's the precious human rebirth, and then impermanence and death, and then the suffering of the lower realms, and then refuge and karma, the law of cause and effect. Anyway, the attitude of bodhicitta, generating compassion, and the attitude striving to achieve enlightenment, bodhicitta comes far later, right, much at the end. But here in the Bodhisattva's way of life, the first chapter is about the benefits of bodhicitta. So it starts off talking about bodhicitta. And then, so like in the verses we've just spoken about today, then he talks about, after talking about the benefits of bodhicitta, then the second chapter on confessing negativities, so confessing all the non-virtuous things we've done or do that would be obstacles to that. Then in the third chapter, the ritual for actually adapting the mind of enlightenment in a ritual. So then in the fourth chapter, then he starts talking about all like the precious human rebirth, impermanence and death, suffering of the lower realms, but he's relating them all back to bodhicitta, how they bear on this project of striving to become enlightened and increasing our aspiration to become enlightened. So that's one. It's when you think about how to meditate on the Lamrim, it's not that you have to just meditate on the earlier topics, the topics of the small scope of impermanence and death. Precious human life, impermanence and death, suffering of the lower realms, all just in relation to the attitude of the mind of small capacity. But rather, this is showing us how to meditate on those topics in relation to the great scope and how they work to increase our enthusiasm for it, increase our conscientiousness and our mindfulness about the importance of and how to practice bodhicitta. So I just wanted to point out that. Also, it's a good example for showing how to present the Buddhist teachings. That to present the Buddhist teachings, you don't have to present them in the order of the way they're set out in the Lamrim, but you can also present the ideals and the worldview of the Bodhisattva path right at the beginning, and then relate everything to that, which is, I think, it's more suitable, it's more appropriate for a modern audience in general. Okay, so that's my last kind of thing I wanted to say today. So we've stopped at verse, we went through verse 32, yeah. We'll go from next time, I'm not sure who's teaching next time, but we'll go from verse 33. So are there any questions or comments at the end here?
Can you just explain again verse 27, the first two lines?
Right, verse 27, the first two lines. Then, as though I were hypnotized by a spell, I shall reduce this mind to nothing. So there he's talking about, although understanding what an incredibly fortunate opportunity we have in this life to practice the spiritual path. But then if we didn't do that, and then we didn't do that, and instead we engaged in a lot of very harmful actions, negative actions, and then take rebirth in hell, and then we know what we did, like we know how we wasted this life and engaged in a lot of negative actions, and then took rebirth in hell, how it would be as though, as though we were hypnotized by a spell, as though during this life we were under the spell of our afflictive emotions. We were totally, just like when someone hypnotizes with us, when someone hypnotizes another person, that person who's been hypnotized is under the control of the hypnotist, right? So like that, if we are totally overwhelmed by our afflictive emotions and we don't do anything to reduce them, it's like they're a hypnotist, and we're being hypnotized by our own afflictive emotions. And then they led us into this terrible, hell, like this incredibly suffering experience. So as though hypnotized by a spell, I shall reduce this mind to nothing. My mind would be totally overwhelmed with with remorse and with grief and a sense of tragedy at what I've done to myself by following the afflictive emotions. I think that's what it's saying.
So reduce this mind to nothing means the fact that I have a human mind, I'm fortunate to have a human mind, and I'm not taking advantage of it. Is that what it means?
I think it means reduce the mind to nothing in the sense that my mind would be totally overwhelmed with like incredible grief. Imagine like a mother whose only child, and she sees the child like die before her eyes or something. How the mind would be so, so overwhelmed with sadness that it's like totally dysfunctional. It'd be like that, like reduce the mind to nothing in that sense. Yeah. Any other questions? Abban has a question. Yes?
Legtsok, when we're reborn as a deva, we have to have some pretty good karma to be reborn as a deva.
Yes.
Yet it seems to be a place where you're at a standstill. You can't progress from there.
Yes.
So what's the advantage?
Well, I mean, in terms of Dharma practice, there's no real advantage in terms of, but
that's what every lifetime is about, isn't it? Or should be about, that you are improving. So if you end up in as a deva because of your good karmas, and you're stuck there and you can't progress, it doesn't seem to be very good karma then.
Well, it's not, I mean, it's good karma. I mean, karma, whether a karma is a good karma or a bad karma, is more related to whether that karma has the ability to produce pleasant experiences. Right? All of our pleasant experiences are the results of good karma. Right? But pleasant experiences don't necessarily entail like good conditions for practicing Dharma. Right? So a good karma, just because a karma is a good karma, or positive karma, or virtuous karma, doesn't mean it's going to produce necessarily conditions that are helpful to our practice of Dharma. Right? So that's two different things. So yeah, most of the rebirths as a deva, or many of them, are probably not very good for practicing Dharma because there's not enough intelligence and especially not enough suffering. So that it's easy to generate aversion to samsara. But there are exceptions, like there is a common practice of praying to take rebirth in a pure land, a Buddha's pure land. Every time a being becomes enlightened, they also create an enlightened environment where other ordinary sentient beings can take rebirth into that environment. So like especially in the Chinese Buddhist tradition, there's this pure land practice where people's main practice is praying to Amitabha, Buddha, and making strong prayers to take rebirth in Amitabha's Buddhist pure land. But in Tibetan Buddhism it also exists. There, like in the 6th session Guru Yoga, there's prayers to take rebirth in Shambhala, which is another pure land. Or there's rebirth in pure land of Vajrayana, rebirth in pure land of the Maitreya, Tushita. So if you take rebirth in a pure land, that's also a deva. You would be a deva, not a human being. But the conditions there for practicing Dharma are very good. So it's not that all devas necessarily they don't have good conditions practicing Dharma. Some do. But generally, it's not good conditions. But there's no contradiction with that being a result of very good karma. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to take you forward. That's what I'm.
No, it doesn't take you forward, but
it might be a very pleasant place for the time being, but it doesn't take you forward.
Yeah. But it's still the result of a very positive karma. That's what I'm saying. There's no contradiction because there's no necessary correlation between being a good karma and being a karma that's going to take you forward in your spiritual practice. There's no relationship with that.
But in Shambhala and
Amitabha is pure land.
Yeah. Then you can progress.
Yes, it's excellent condition for progressing. You receive Dharma teachings all the time. It's very easy to practice Dharma.
And you don't create negative karmas.
You don't create negative karmas. No. Yeah.
Shambhala really exists in the Himalaya or what?
Shambhala, Shambhala, there's a lot of discussion about where Shambhala is or what it is. But I think it's not, it's probably like some would say it's a mythical place, but I don't know. Yeah, some would say it's probably a pure land. It's like a heaven. It's not on earth, not a place on earth that we can physically go to, but it's like a different kind of dimension of reality that you can take rebirth into, or you can access somehow through transforming the mind.
But all these guys used to have expeditions to look for it, right? The Nazis and all.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Tibet,
I've heard that.
Shambhala.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I've heard
They have
stuff like that.
expeditions
Yeah.
looking for this place.
Yeah, and then there's descriptions, because it's related to Guru Rinpoche also, Padma Sambhava, that there's say that he came from Shambhala, he went back to Shambhala, and it's in the northwest. So sometimes people think it's around the area of the Peshawar Valley in Pakistan, or where Takshashila used to be. But then, yeah, there's talk about the Gayu, these hidden lands, even throughout the Himalayas, where the Guru Rinpoche supposedly went and blessed those places, and then in those places you can gain access to Shambhala, like
They're like portals or something.
yeah, like kind of a portal. You can go to another dimension, but I don't know. There's a lot of confusion about what it is, and I don't have anything to clarify it really. But I think it's safe to think of it as a pure land, someplace you can take rebirth into through strong prayers and through having merit, like the other Buddhist pure lands. That if you accumulate a lot of merit and make strong prayers to take rebirth in that place, then it's possible to take rebirth there. I mean, other people describe Shambhala as like a time in the future. It's like it doesn't exist now. The kings of Shambhala will come in the future and kind of wipe out all malevolent forces on earth, and transform earth into like a perfect place for practicing Dharma. There's also some kind of...
It is also said that the 10,000 Buddhas of Tibet gather on mountain of Himalaya. So Buddha again come in the form of some appearance. Buddha give appearance to those 10,000 monks of Buddhist monks. So it is true or something?
What, that the Buddha will appear to 10,000 Buddhist monks in the Himalayas?
Yeah.
I don't know.
10,000 enlightened human beings.
Well, it's said that in this fortunate eon, 1,000 Buddhas will come to earth and just teach the Dharma of those, the Shakyamuni Buddhas, the fourth. But I've never heard something about Buddhas appearing to 10,000 Buddhist monks in the Himalayas or something like that. That I don't know. I've never heard of a prophecy or something like that.
You must hear about the J. Krishnamurtis. J. Krishnamurti.
Yeah.
So all the Theosophical Society try to incarnate Buddha on the J. Krishnamurti.
Yeah.
But he refused to.
Yeah, I've heard of him. Yeah, I know. Yeah. Yeah, Theosophical Society though, I'm not really sure. The Madame Blavatsky was one of the leading figures in those. But I read in a history of the life of William James. Not only William James. William James is the father of modern psychology. He was a great scholar in Harvard in the United States. But he was involved with this, I think it's called the Psychical Research Society in England, or Psychical, PRS or PR, anyway, in the late 1800s, there was a lot of interest in, what's it called? Like mediums.
Psychic
What is it called? Spiritual.
Mediums,
Mediums, spiritual mediums, and psychics, and these clairvoyants, and these kind of powers. So this group of open-minded scientists in England, they formed a society to research people who were claiming these kind of powers. Mostly they were debunking people who were just using, magic tricks, using trickery to scam people out of money, saying that they could do things when they couldn't. So one of the people they debunked was Madame Blavatsky. In a big way. This researcher came to India because she fled Europe and moved to India and set up in India, and she built her own temple. And her big thing was receiving letters from another dimension. People would ask questions, and then letters would just appear out of the air, and then she would take them and they would have answers to the people's questions or something like that. So she had this temple built and this special altar where the letters would just appear in drawers. But this researcher, he finally got access to the back of the altar, and he found it was just a trick. There was people back there like writing letters and putting them in the drawers. And then the very next day she burnt down the whole thing so that nobody would. But she was claiming some kind of knowledge and initiation and teachings from Tibetan lamas also. But according to this history though, she was just a total fake. But I don't know. Anyway, that's a big sidetrack discussion. Indrani, do you have something?
If you just explain it a bit more on doubt and wrong views.
Doubt? Well, doubt is a two-pointed mind where you're not sure. I mean, afflictive doubt. There's healthy doubt and there's afflictive doubt. Healthy doubt is like to think, oh, is it true that past and future lives exist, or is it true that any sentient being has the potential to achieve enlightenment, or is it true that there is no Atman, that there's no inherently existent self or not? Those are all healthy doubts. I mean, we should have those kind of doubts because they lead us into learning things. Afflictive doubt is when you're just at a standpass. It's described like a two-pointed needle, like a needle for sewing clothes. It's important it only has one point because it has to be able to pass through the cloth again and again. If it has 2 points, like a fork, then it can't go anywhere, right? You can't use it. So if your mind is like two-pointed, thinking, I don't know if I should do this or if I should do this, and you're just at an impasse, or I don't know if this exists or this doesn't exist, or it's like that or like that, and then you just leave it at that, then it's going to impede your progress, your learning, and your ability to do anything. So that's like an afflictive doubt. Does that make sense?
So, but how it is not 10 non-virtuous negative, 10 non-virtuous action?
There's no doubt in the 10 non-virtuous actions. Doubt is not
Doubt
there. No. There's three non-virtues of body, 4 non-virtues of speech, and the 3 non-virtues of mind. Right. So the 3 non-virtues of mind are covetousness, malice, and wrong views. Right. So there's no doubt. So the wrong views in that case is views that like liberation and enlightenment are impossible. That it's impossible to achieve those. Or like the Buddha Dharma Sangha doesn't exist. Like there's no such thing actually as a Buddha, and so there's no such thing as his teachings which can liberate from suffering, and there's no Sangha, those don't exist. Or like those aren't a valid refuge, they don't really lead to freedom from suffering. Or that past and future lives don't exist, that's wrong. Or that the law of cause and effect, law of karma, it's not true that virtuous karmas result in pleasant experiences and non-virtuous karmas result in unpleasant experiences. So those kind of wrong views.
What about that there is no creator? There is a creator. Is that a wrong view too?
That
there is
a
God, a creator who created everything, and so all this is caused by him, and all our destiny is made by him.
It's one kind of wrong view.
That's a wrong view too.
Yes. Also. Yeah, but it has different consequences. Yeah, it's not the ones listed in the non-virtuous actions are especially not believing law of cause and effect.
Nihilistic views.
Yeah, as a nihilistic view. Yeah, it's a nihilistic view. It's especially dangerous, that one, because it leads to immorality. It leads to thinking whatever I do, no matter how harmful or destructive it is to other people, like killing or lying or stealing, it doesn't matter, right? Because there's no repercussion. As long as I'm not caught, then there's no repercussions for me in the future. So it easily leads to creating a lot of non-virtue, which leads to rebirth.
So wrong view is basically if you don't accept the Buddhist view. It seems to be like that.
Yeah, it gets close to that, no? Uncomfortably close to that.
Other religions are wrong. I mean, you can take it that much further.
Well, no, it's not.
Obviously the views are different.
Well, the philosophical views, I mean, a lot of the philosophical views asserted by other religions are wrong. Yeah, we would say that. But we wouldn't say like the other religion is wrong, right? There's a difference between like, a person, if I have wrong views, then it's not that I'm wrong. There's something wrong with me. It's just that I have some mistaken views, which could lead into problems for me, right?
But it's very relative also.
It's very relative, yeah. It's very well, but here it's like what's true and what's not according to
the
reason, logic. It's not just because the Buddha said then we have to believe that, or just because the Buddha said then it's right. I mean, we have the freedom to investigate and to question and to
But you
analyze.
can't really, what happens after we die, we don't really know. There is an act of faith here, isn't it?
Well, we don't really know, but we can have logical reasons for, wondering, well, why is it anything happens to us at all?
Correct. But it's still theoretical in that sense, meaning it's a hypothetical. It's not, you can't say it's a fact and therefore if you don't agree with it, it's wrong.
It's inductive reasoning. It's like,
Yeah.
like when you have
Meaning it's a
experience.
mystery we don't know. Actually, these are the great mysteries. We can only speculate and say, okay, I think this sounds reasonable.
Yeah, but we can have reasons for us making one assertion
Correct,
versus
but
another.
it's not, it's not empirical, it's not a fact in
No,
that
but I
sense.
think-
We don't know these are mysteries. Isn't it? After we die,
I
what
think
happens,
it's
we
fact.
don't
But
really
it's-
know.
Yeah, take this
I think
back.
the Buddhist view in particular, at least in the context in which it developed historically, was very much like as a resistance to mere speculation. So we can, there's a difference between just pausing hypothesis and just theorizing things, whereas I think the Buddha really stressed on what you've experienced and then sort of empirically deducing or generalizing, like an inductive inference. Just like how scientists, they tested 100 times and it has happened 100 times, so therefore they can posit some kind of universal law that this is the case.
Yeah, partly inductive, but partially also just deductive reason. Why is it that, how do you experience that, how do you explain that, we have some experiences of happiness and some experiences of suffering, right? What are explanations for that? Either it's no cause, which we don't see, and there's nothing that seems to arise in the physical world with no cause, or it comes from, some creator, some all-powerful being making us happy, but then there's a lot of contradictions that come with that. Or it's just random cause and effect in which what we do has no implication at all. Or there's the cause, certain causes produce certain kinds of results, because they, just by nature, that they agree with each other, right? Just like in the physical world, there's certain causes produce certain results, and there's a pattern to that causation. Right? So the Buddha is asserting what seems to be the most reasonable, that also with our mental experiences, there's a pattern, that certain mental acts, they produce certain kind of results in our experience, just in the same way the physical world works. So in that way, there's quite strong reasoning behind the assertion. It's not just... But it's true. What's going to happen in our future life, our next future life, how we're going to be reborn, what experience we're going to have, we can't say for sure. There's only a certain set of probabilities according to the different causes and conditions that we know exist at this point. But
One
there's
of
no
the things
certainty.
I'm always intrigued by is, in those days we didn't know about genes, but now we do.
Yeah.
Is there a connection when you say past life, because that is your past life, isn't it? Literally, genes, what you inherit. It's inherited. We inherit,
Yeah.
so in that
we
sense...
inherit genes,
yeah,
but that's
no,
not our past life. That's
it
just
is
a story
not.
of our...
It's different. It's
It's a
totally
story of
different.
our body, basically. Genes primarily dictate what kind of body we have.
Also,
but of course,
but what we are, how we inherit so many things. So what I am in life is to a large extent what I've inherited, through my genes.
yeah.
And therefore it will affect the next generation. I was just wondering if
Yeah, I don't think genes can explain everything
not
about
everything.
who you are.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, has it been, meaning, does that have anything to do with karma is what I was wondering.
Definitely. What genes you have in this life have to do with what kind of karma you
Yes,
created in the past
there is a
life.
connection, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. But it's not like genes can explain away everything to do about
of
karma.
course not.
No. Yeah.
But it's part of it.
Yeah,
You inherit
definitely.
what you
Yeah.
inherit.
Yeah. Just like whether you have an attractive body or unattractive body, whether you have a short body or tall body, it's also
Or even
related
your
to karma.
behavior. If you're using these
Behavior.
Buddhist
If you're a violent person or a peaceful person
Yeah,
by nature,
yes.
you see little children, they have different dispositions,
Yes,
right?
yes.
That's related to their karma, but that karma is also expressed through their genes.
Yeah.
Because you have the genes you have because you're born to the set of parents that you're born to, right? You can't
Yes.
have genes that your parents didn't pass on to you, right? So, but why are you born to that set of parents? That's karma. right? So then the karma dictates what genes you have also.
Yeah.
In that way.
Yeah.
Oh, but back to the, I mean, you were saying about other religions, because it's a bit of a dicey thing. I mean, when you talk about wrong views, according to Buddhism, what are wrong views, right? And why are they detrimental? But then you don't want to jump to say that means all other religions are wrong, right? Because many other religions, they clearly have the ability to benefit many people. Because there are many right assertions, right? Just because, according to Buddhist philosophical views, other philosophical assertions by other religions, some of them are wrong. It doesn't mean everything about that religion is wrong, and it doesn't mean that religion doesn't benefit other people. Like, for example, in Hinduism or Islam or Christianity, they all promote morality, practicing pure morality. So by practicing any of those religions sincerely, you create the causes to take a good human rebirth, right? Which is excellent. And I mean, they all promote like not killing, not stealing, not lying. In terms of morality, they all promote treating other sentient beings with kindness and generating a good heart, generating compassion for those who are like in Islam. There's this great rule that whatever wealth, if you're an affluent person or whatever, I'm not sure how, whatever wealth, you should give 10% to the poor every year. Or you should, to people who are part of your community, you should give loans free of interest and not collect interest. I mean, those are excellent things to generate concern for those who are less fortunate than we are. Or in Christianity, you can see how many schools and hospitals they create everywhere. I mean, sometimes, with strings attached, but oftentimes with no strings attached. So you can see every religion has, if the great religions of the world didn't benefit people, they wouldn't exist for so long, right? So clearly they benefit a lot of people. But the philosophical views we can differ about, and so as Buddhists, I think it's okay to say, oh yeah, the belief in a creator God is wrong, belief there's no past and future life. That's a wrong view, but it doesn't mean that people who hold those views are bad people or there's something wrong. It just means holding those views is going to lead to these kind of, it can lead to these kind of repercussions, which would be unfortunate, right? And also that those views are not supported by reason, or they're wrong for this and this reason. But it doesn't mean that there should be any less concern for the people who hold those, or any less regard or less respect for those religions. Or those people.
So different views.
That's important. Different views. But according to what Buddhists, have concluded is true, not according to that, right? And of course, the Buddhists, every religion, they're the same. They're going to say, this is true for this reason. But the important thing is, what are the reasons for holding that belief? What are the things that would counter that? And how do you answer those questions? What are the arguments that counter your beliefs? And how can you respond to those questions? I'm not saying every view the Buddhists have is kind of tried and tested, and there's no room for questioning about it. There's many views the Buddhists assert that I don't know how to answer. And when you look at evidence, there's some evidence that goes against. Anyway, we've run out of time, so I don't want to keep going, but there's a lot of room for questioning and doubt, and there's no problem with doing that. It's good because it leads to your understanding deepening.
One more question.
Okay, last question. Yes.
So in Gita, Krishna said, if you kill a man, but if you kill a man by non-identified with the actions, then this will not be a part of your karma.
If you kill a man by?
Non-identifying the action. You don't identify the action.
You don't identify the action?
Then it will not be a part of karma.
What does it mean to not identify the action?
You don't know, so now you're killing.
Oh, you don't identify...
No. Means you are aware of state. In awareness, if you kill a man,
yes,
then it will not be a part of the action. Karma.
No, I think it would be. If you kill a man, you perform the act of killing. So that's a karma. It's an action you've done.
Arjuna has killed many people.
Yeah.
But he said in Gita that just as you feel like that you are not the part of the killing.
Yeah.
You remain centered in your witness.
Yeah.
Or in your awareness and kill the man.
Yeah.
Then there is no problem.
But they also all ended up in hell
Because
first
it's
before
part of
they
the
went
dharma.
to
He didn't say.
Yeah, I don't know.
So like,
I disagree with that.
Yeah, I disagree.
If you look at
Understand.
chapter 16 of the...
Oh, you mean you disagree that the Gita is saying that? Or
Gita is saying that.
you
Gita is saying
disagree with
that.
what the Gita is
no,
saying?
but like they all ended up in
disagree with the
hell
spirit of
first before
I
going
see,
to
I
heaven.
see.
That
So-
in
But
chapter
maybe what is the
16,
motivation behind the killing? Is
Killing,
what
and
he
it's
meant.
not an
Maybe let's let this gentleman
Life
finish his
only,
comment
I think
first. No,
it's
we don't, I'll
timeless
jump in.
enough.
We talk one by one.
so
Yes.
in chapter 16,
Yes.
it talks about what are the good qualities of a person.
Yes.
And the qualities it lists as being good is more or less the same as Buddhist qualities. Being harmless, being kind, being gentle,
Uh-huh.
all those things. It's not consistent with what you're saying.
But he's teaching Arjuna to kill all the men.
Yeah, but like he's a soldier, right? So there's this
Not
concept of
soldier,
then again,
everyone
like,
is
like, is it
is
in your
divine.
hands?
Yeah.
You know, like are all soldiers who are sort of like.
But soldier is also a human being. If you are killing a soldier, he is also a human being.
Yes. Yeah.
But like.
But that is doing your duty, no? That's what the Gita says. You're supposed to
that's
do
what
your
I'm
dharma.
saying.
No,
Your
what do you mean
duty,
by
that's...
duty?
Well, that is how I
You're
think.
defending your country,
It's,
for instance, I mean.
You're supposed to do your duty as...
You guys can continue the discussion after. Yeah, the time is up, but you guys can continue this talking about afterwards. Okay, so let's dedicate with some prayers. Maybe we don't need to read prayers. I'll just say something, and you can generate dedication. So think of all the virtuous, positive energy we've created here together by discussing the Buddhist teachings, meditating on, reflecting on. So rejoice in all the virtue we've created here. And then rejoice in all the merits created by all sentient beings everywhere, especially by all of our own gurus, the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and all holy beings in the past, in the present, and the future. So by all this merit we've gathered together, may true spiritual teachings spread everywhere in the world, where they have spread, may they not decline. And may all people like us, all sentient beings, sincerely striving in wholesome spiritual practice, have all conditions to make progress in the practice and be led by fully qualified, unmistaken teachers. And may all the authentic spiritual teachers who live and benefit sentient beings now have long and stable lives. May all of our actions only please those holy gurus. And in the future, from life to life, may we always take a precious human rebirth and meet with conditions to continually follow our spiritual path, and likewise for all other sentient beings. So especially beings born in the lower realms, in the hell realms, animal, ghost, hungry realms, may their karma to exist there quickly be exhausted, and may they quickly take rebirth in a precious human life. Especially those who have recently died and are passing through the intermediate state, and take a precious human life. And then especially also all the human beings who exist now who are afflicted with Alzheimer's disease or dementia, depression, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, other mental, physical afflictions. May they be quickly freed from all of those. And then everywhere in the world where there's famine, hunger, thirst, violent conflict, abuse, oppression, anti-Semitism, other forms of bigotry, prejudice, and anger in people's minds, just even simple anger. May people be freed from all of those, and may all beings treat each other, hold each other in their mind, in their hearts, hold each other with loving concern, equal concern for one another. And may all of our actions only be causes for all of these things to come about.
Excuse me, a friend of mine just died a name Mary Machado.
Okay, Mary Machado.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? Have someone you would like us to dedicate for? So dedicate for Mary Machado to take a precious human rebirth. Anyone else? Yeah, name of anybody sick or recently died. Alright, whatever other prayers you have, then may all of those prayers be answered. Okay, thank you very much. So we'll conclude there.
Okay, could all just remaining your places?